Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, the first podcast bringing the local fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I'm Joe Bias, sitting here with Butch Theory. Butch,
Hey-o.
How about that prediction last week? We didn't call Captain Bobby like Nostradamus or something. That's going to be his new nickname. I mean, that cold snap has completely changed things like almost overnight. I can't wait to get the report this week and hear, how the other anglers experience what he was talking about.
Yep, I'm ready, man. I got a big old package from Joey and Angelo for our trip next week. I got a bunch of slick lures. I got the B-Cat that Bobby was bragging on last week. I got a bunch of the little slicks. Pretty excited to get them in the water.
I'm excited about Thanksgiving week. That's the one week I always try to get on down to Fowl River and do some fishing. It's terrible in there right now. I don't think anybody should go down there Thanksgiving week.
For sure.
I haven't heard not one single good thing out of that river. It's just been bad for years, really. I would just go definitely somewhere else.
Snakes.
Yeah, there is. Definitely. Alligators are really bad, too. Woo.
This time of year.
Wasn't there some kind of a big definite contamination or something?
Other than that, man, no, you're right. It's pretty cool. I mean, Bobby nailed it within like a day. He said it's going to happen like tomorrow, and it did. The transition has transitioned.
I'm looking forward to that artificial bite. However, I might have to still go get me a few live shrimp.
Yeah, just for fun.
Just for funsies. Butch, who's bringing us the show this week?
Geico, buddy. This week's show is brought to us by our local Geico insurance office. Everybody knows Geico has great auto rates. Did you also know they have great rates on boats, ATVs, motorcycles, and personal watercraft? Give Ron Davis a call at 251-445-0053. Not only will Ron work hard for you to get your premium the lowest possible, but you'll have the service you expect and can count on if you ever need to make a claim. Geico does even more than insure your valuable items. They also offer on-the-water services like towing, battery jumps, gas delivery, and you can save by bundling these services with your insurance. If you're an Alabama saltwater fisherman, support the local insurance agent that brings you the fishing report each week. Call Ron Davis, Geico agent, at 251-445-0053 or visit him online at geico.com/mobile-al.
Butch, do you think Geico would appreciate it if you did that next time in like the gecko voice?
That'd be difficult. I don't have a very good accent. A redneck gecko. Rednecko.
A rednecko. Mm. So even though the blue water fishing is going off right now, big tunas, great marlin bite, all the guys that got the report are traveling, believe it or not, while we're recording. So they're not going to be able to give us a report. So we're going to give you guys the hearsay report. It sounds like some of the best conditions of the year. All these fish were caught on one floater. So when have you ever heard of 16, 17 blue marlin opportunities on one weekend in the Gulf of Mexico for multiple boats? That doesn't usually happen. I mean, two boats getting, 16, 17 shots on blue marlin? That's nuts.
I would say that's pretty extraordinary.
The Gulf of Mexico, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man,
I'm jealous. I would love to get down on some of that.
This is just like we said before, this time of year, you got to be sitting on go. If you want to book a trip. You may not get to go because of weather, but doesn't mean if you do get to go, it's going to be more often than not, it's going to be a great trip. And you really need to consider talking to these captains if you want to book a charter and doing it later in the fall, because they're still out there. Everybody thinks like they go somewhere else. They're not. They are there. Blue water conditions are good. And, man, there ain't nothing better than catching blue marlin in the air conditioning.
Very, very good weather. Putting some work in on the blue marlin on the back deck for sure, dude. No sweating going on there, I wouldn't think.
Nah. Well, I hate we're not going to have a report this week just because I love hearing the tactics and, the tips that these guys are using to be effective out there. But what we are going to do is focus on onshore and inshore opportunities, and there are a lot of those as well. So let's start it off by talking to Scott Kennedy. We're going to get the onshore report. Scott does a lot of kayak fishing, and he's on a really good sheep's head bite. What's up, Scott? What's going on in the world of paddle fishing, buddy?
What's going on, guys? I tell you, it's getting cold out there for us kayakers. The water is definitely taking a drop, but it is good for the fishing. We have been on some pretty good fish this week.
Scott, I know this time of year you got to kind of split time between, do I chase ducks, do I chase deer, or do I get out in the kayak? And I know you can do a little bit of all of it from the kayak, but what's been the focus for you here recently? From the shore, is it speckled trout? Is it sheep's head? Is it redfish? Is it all the above?
Kind of at the beginning of the week into last weekend, we were looking for trout, kind of, playing around with trout, catching some redfish here and there. And slowly as this week's building up, we have switched completely to sheephead. I mean, we're having some great days chasing the sheephead. So we're basically targeting sheephead primarily on our trip, and we have not been disappointed one bit.
Is this a pattern that you've came across this time of year from years past, or is this something you're just kind of stumbling upon now? Because, I mean, typically when we think about sheep's head, I typically think about, late winter, early spring.
Same.
Those fish stacking up on the rigs and structure on the mouth of Mobile Bay and on out into the Gulf of Mexico. But it sounds like you're having pretty much the same results, and here we are late November.
Yeah, I tell you, normally I'm same like you said. I'm primarily targeting sheephead, kind of in the early part of the year, like, January, February. But one thing I noticed was, through the power of social media and everything, I noticed some of the guys over in Pensacola area, they were starting to catch a lot of sheephead and having some pretty good trips over the past 2 or 3 weeks. And it's some areas where they're fishing where, when they're catching fish there, I catch sheephead in my normal spots, back in the spring. And kind of almost happened upon them, to an extent. We were out there doing some speckled trout fishing, like I said, and kind of fishing near some areas where I do pick up sheephead in the spring. And, we were throwing some live shrimp on popping corks, and one of the guys with me, he ended up making a cast that, for a trout might have been a little tight to the pilings, but he ended up letting it sit for a minute or two. And after it sat for just a second, he ended up hooking a big fish and pulled it off the pilings, and it ended up being a sheephead. And, that kind of got the wheels turning in my head a little bit. So after he caught that one, we tied on some sheephead rigs and, started fishing the spots there that we do hit in the spring. And I tell you, it did not take long to kind of key in on them. We were fishing the live shrimp, kind of cutting them in half that first day. And, the bites were a little bit slower. We might have to wait, a few minutes in between each bite, but they were definitely there. And, kind of as the next time we went out there, next time I got out, I decided to bring, some fiddler crabs with us on that next trip. Got lucky, and some of the bait shops down here have some live fiddler crabs in stock. So picked some of those up, brought some sheephead rigs with us, and got out. And we just had a jam up day, and ended up, like you mentioned, we had some numbers like we're used to in the spring. Not necessarily getting the size, the big fat ones that we get in the springtime, but there's a lot of the cookie cutters, 2 to 3 pounders, good eating size in my opinion, not too big to have to worry about cleaning or anything, but you still get a pretty decent fillet off of them. Yeah, I tell you, and it's just, we've kind of been, like I said, after we had a couple good trips on them, we decided just to keep focusing on them. And now this has been, probably about 4 trips this week that we've done real good on them.
That's awesome. I'm going to bring you back a little bit. You mentioned fishing the pilings. You guys keying in on dock pilings or bridge pilings, or where do they seem to be congregating in numbers?
We've been mostly fishing kind of dock pilings. The bigger the dock piling, the bigger the dock, the better. But with that being said, any kind of big concrete rubble or anything like that, we've pulled a couple off that. But, primarily we're looking at wooden dock pilings and that kind of stuff.
We see that we've heard in the past that scraping barnacles can be a good way to kind of get those fish fired up. Is that something y'all are having to do, or are you more just trying to cover ground and find fish?
Well, I tell you, I'm a big believer in scraping barnacles, but this time of year, we've gotten lucky. We hadn't really had to do much of it. Of course, when I'm first getting there and getting set up on my spot, I'm scraping, I'm doing a little bit of scraping, but it kind of seems like after that first scrape, you really don't have to do it anymore. We're still getting bites consistent, and especially having those fiddler crabs, that seems to kind of be the bait of choice. It seems to get the bite a little bit quicker with them. And it's just,
well, that's cool to hear, man. Like you typically think of, like we say,
it's a seasonal bonus, I feel like.
For sure. Well, it's just good to know that.
It's definitely
good to know you were able to switch gears and really say, okay, we're going to target these fish, and we're able to do that. Now, you did mention switching over to sheep's head rigs, and that's a real good way to bring in this week's Hey Cap question, and it's brought to us by Daycool Heating and Air. As the saying goes, if you don't like the weather in South Alabama, wait 10 minutes because it's going to change. One of the things that is very predictable, however, is the pricing at Daycool Heating and Air. They offer flat rate pricing and don't charge for after-hours calls. Your HVAC always seems to act up when you need it the most, so don't get stuck between a rock and a hot place or cold place this time of year. Daycool offers flat $45 service calls, $59 tune-ups, and they offer free estimates on equipment replacement. The pros at Daycool have been serving Mobile and Baldwin counties for over a decade, so contact them at 251-633-5121 or check them out online at www.daycoolair.com or on the Daycool Heating and Air mobile app. Their license number AL07028. All right, Scott, we picked this question just for you, buddy. Mark Boger says, hey, Cap, what is your favorite hook size and rig setup for targeting sheep's head? And Mark, guess what, buddy? We got a new Hey Cap sponsor coming in this week, and that is Pure Flats, the slick lure. Those guys are going to be sending you a pack of slick lures. Just hit us up at Alabama at bestfishingreport.com with your information, and Joey Landreneau is going to send you a pack of slick lures, which is probably the best big speckled trout bait that anybody's heard of in a long time. So thanks, Slick Lure, for being a part of the Hey Cap question. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I tell you, when I'm sheephead fishing, I like really, really small hooks. I'm usually using a size 6 or a size 8 hook. I like the little octopus J hooks. And when you're looking at them, you're gonna say they're too small, but I mean you can catch a pretty big fish on that tiny hook, and especially with a sheephead's mouth, they got all those teeth in there, and it's tough to get a bigger hook, to really sink in there. So having that small hook, it's able to find some meat to hook into a little bit easier, and of course you can hide it in the bait a little bit easier too. Like if you're using fiddler crabs or something, you can hide it right in there, make it look like another little leg hanging out. So, if they're being kind of finicky, which a lot of times when we're sheephead fishing, they can be real, real finicky. So being able to hide that hook's real good. As far as a rig, I like to do kind of basically just like a Carolina rig, but I'm using a split shot instead of, a swivel and an egg weight. So I'll just tie on about a 18-inch leader or so. I usually use 20-pound fluorocarbon or mono. And I'll just put that split shot, maybe 6 to 8 inches above the hook. And, it's a real lightweight rig. It's tough. So if you're fishing some current, you might have to bump it up to a traditional Carolina rig with a little bit heavier weight. But, for shallower water, low current. So that's a real good rig. But with that being said, I have been using some of these, swing head jigs lately. And it's basically just like a jig head you would put in a soft plastic, but it's got a J hook on it that's able to kind of swing around. And I've been having a lot of luck on those, and it's just kind of, it helps you feel the bite a little bit better. I don't know if the hookup rate's quite as good as the Carolina rig, but it definitely helps you feel that bite a good bit better.
You mentioned the small hook, and that's one of those words where it's like, okay, small hook. Are you talking about the gap of the hook, or are you talking about the diameter, meaning is it a light wire hook? So what do you mean when you say small hook? Does it need to be
my small is probably way different than your small, being from the offshore world too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, do you need a thinner hook, or are you talking more gap size?
It's kind of both. It's got a real small gap size, and it's got a real light wire to it. And it's something real small, maybe the size of your thumbnail, kind of that size, just real tiny.
I like it. So, I've talked a little bit before about when I lived in Jacksonville for a little while, and over in Jacksonville, flounder fishing's a lot different, and sheep's head fishing's a good bit different too. One of the things they did is almost everybody was fishing with, jig heads and filler crabs. So they're just hooking filler crabs to jig heads. Now, you just mentioned that. How do you work that? So when I was fishing there, and I'm by no means an expert, and I caught a few fish, but I wasn't tearing them up by any means. I was working that jig head with a fiddler crab, kind of working it down some jetties and kind of bouncing it on its way down towards the bottom. When you're fishing these dock pilings, are you just kind of casting it up there and letting it sit, or you moving it around at all? What's the strategy there?
For the most part, being in these kayaks, we're able to get real tight to these docks. I'm talking, underneath them a lot of times. And so that has us fishing vertical on these pilings. And what I'll do is I'll drop it all the way to the bottom, let it sit, flat on the bottom right next to the piling for, maybe a minute or so. After it sits there, if I'm not feeling any bites, I'll just kind of slowly start reeling it up, and I'll reel it up, maybe about a foot, and then just kind of repeat the process. Let it sit for a minute or so, and then reel it up a foot, let it sit. And you can kind of get an idea of where the fish are hitting after that. And, if I start to realize, most of the fish are sitting, a couple feet off the bottom, then I'll just start dropping it, straight to that depth and letting it sit. So I guess I'm not actually, really jigging it at all.
Right.
As much as just kind of, working different depths.
Are you noticing any trends with the sheep's head with regards to water depth? So these docks, I imagine, they're probably long docks. Are you finding the fish in 3 to 5 foot range, 6 to 10 foot range? Have you noticed any or are they just kind of all over the place?
I haven't found them in that kind of, 3 to 4 foot range, but basically anything deeper than that, we've found fish in. So it's, if you can get 5 feet plus, you should be able to find some fish.
All right, last question, Scott. I tend to overthink everything I do with fishing, so I'm probably overthinking it. But one of the things that I'm kind of weird about is terminal tackle. And I mean, what I say about that, I don't really like swivels. I've just kind of always, I don't know. I just feel like the more hardware that's down there, the more chance I have of being seen. But most of the time, I don't think it really matters. When you're talking about tying on a leader, fluorocarbon leader, and going to that split shop, are you just using a swivel, or are you tying you doing braid to fluorocarbon and putting the split shot on the fluorocarbon?
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way as you. I'm real particular about swivels. I try to avoid them if I can. So I'm just going straight, fluorocarbon tied onto my braid using just a triple surgeon's knot. And that way, you don't have the swivel to worry about getting up in your guides or anything. And it's one less thing for the fish to see too.
Triple surgeon's knot. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that one. Are you, Joe?
Is that 3 times as good as just the surgeon's knot?
Is that better than the Huffnagel that Chris Veche ties?
What about the Yucatan knot?
What about the Southwest Pass expansion knot that I'm proficient at?
So Scott, is the triple surgeon's knot, is that the one you pull out to impress the ladies, or do you have another knot that's a really obscure knot that you like to go to?
Yeah, no, this is definitely not the fancy knot. It's the quick knot to get the job done. If I'm getting fancy, you definitely got to go with the FG knot.
FG knot. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's a good
I like
one.
it. I like it. Well, it's always a good party trick for sure.
There's nothing like a good knot.
You whip out your favorite knot in front of folks, and people take notice. They take notice. Sure. Scott, cool report this week, man. A lot of people aren't really thinking sheep's head in the fall, but you're on them. If folks want to get up with you, do a sheep's head fishing charter, a inshore kayak fishing charter. I got to do this with you, by the way. Like I've said before on here, I really want to introduce my son to kayak fishing here. But if folks want to do it, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way is to either shoot me an email at kayaking.kennedy@gmail.com, or you can check me out on fishingchaos.com and check out all my open dates and different kinds of trips and that type of thing.
All right, Scott. Well, thanks again for the report, buddy. We'll talk to you again soon. Until then, stay safe out there, man.
Sounds good, guys. We'll talk to y'all later.
Always good to hear from Scott Whistlin Waters. I feel like we need to come up with a nickname for him.
Yeah, I'm tired of Whistling Waters. Old news.
I like the Whistlin Waters. I just like we need.
I like it, but it's just not. He needs his podcast.
Marshal of the Moccasins or something.
It's just got to come. It's just got to come. Don't force it.
All right, man. Let's head on down. I don't know. I say up. I say down, but up, down, all around. See what Captain Richard Rutland's doing. Cold-blooded fishing. What you say, Captain Blood?
What's shaking, fellas? Man, you got it right. Up, down, all around. I've been around the world a couple of times the past couple of weeks here, and it's been quite entertaining.
The bottom feeder, Captain Richard Rutland.
Everywhere. What you been doing?
Well,
give us a rundown. Start from the beginning.
So we just pretty much have finished. I say pretty much. We're definitely done with our flounder tagging project with the Sea Lab this year. We wrapped that up a couple of days ago, and the last trip we had, we've had all these cold fronts through and had the water temperature drop real bad, down into the mid to lower 50s. So that's definitely, in our opinion, as far as fishing goes, as far as what I can tell with my rod tip, the flounder have left the shallow waters of Mobile Bay. Got real lucky on Monday. I was fishing down by the lighthouse, some of the rigs in the upper Gulf there, like right off the beach, and we did catch a flounder, so it was a great success, but it was the wrong kind of flounder. We caught a Gulf flounder out by the lighthouse, and our study is on southern flounder, so we thought we had flounder bite and got all excited about it. We're flapping high fives and everything, and then we look down and we see the three little spots that you can see on the Gulf flounder, and kind of like, oh man.
You know, I didn't think to ask. So with Gulf flounder, is that, Butch, do you know, is it also closed, just the same as southern flounder?
I'll answer that for Butch. But yeah, it's just flounder in general. For our area. We only have 2 flounder here. Well, actually, I take that back. We have other species of flounder, but the ones that we catch are Gulf and southern flounder. Gulf flounder usually don't get as big as southerns, and they're not as common. And most of the time when you catch them, they're a little smaller than the southerns. The 4 or 5 plus pound flounder that you catch in our area are definitely going to be southern flounder, not Gulf.
I'm gonna have to tell Bobby that you're a flounder expert now.
Hey man,
lab, but he's an expert now. I like it.
I'm learning as I go along, man.
Absolutely. Hey, always learn some new stuff for sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
No, I was apologizing for the previous interruption.
What I was going to say, we're talking about learning stuff while we were flounder fishing earlier this week down there around the southern part of the bay and into the, I guess, northern Gulf, right there off of the, lighthouse range, 2 or 3 miles off the beach. We caught a lot of giant white trout out around some of those deeper water rigs. Like I'm talking 30 to 40 feet of water. We're fishing some live finger mullet and some grubs and stuff like that out there. Giant white trout, up to 3 pounds, really big white trout. So that was a really easy thing. It was very much a nuisance trying to catch flounder. And then lots of redfish. We got on a real good redfish bite out on the lighthouse. And 2 or 3 different rigs, we caught nice reds, and they were anywhere from about 22 to about 28, 29 inches long. Just a, great. Yeah, man, there's just a ton of fish out there right now.
Any speckled trout? You been chasing those any?
Yeah, man, speckled trout. Of course, everybody's all in tune to fall fishing right now. I feel like right now, if you've got a favorite spot to go and catch speckled trout, if you think about fall fishing, like you think about the places you fish in the fall, and I'll just name a few, like Bayou La Battery, East Fowl or West Fowl, Dog River, the Industrial Canal, Mobile River, all of those areas. If you've got a favorite spot right now for speckled trout, you need to go and fish it because there's most likely some fish there. It's kind of rare that we're going to a place right now and not finding some type of life. They're not going to be not necessarily going to be monsters, but you're going to find some type of life in most of those areas that what I would call your favorite fall fishing places. It's been wide open. I think yesterday, all we did was focus on speckled trout, and we were tagging and releasing, and I think we tagged 40 fish yesterday. Then that's the legal fish that we caught. We probably caught more like 100 fish, and throw back a bunch. That was the legal fish that we caught. I think we tagged, it was either 39 or 40. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's awesome. It's starting to kind of get busted wide open, in my opinion.
You seeing any of those schools of shrimp, diving birds, or anything like that up there, kind of on the Northern Bay region? Yeah,
so I think there are still some shrimp in the northern end of the bay for sure, because they're seeing some bird schools kind of happen in different areas. Some of the tidal rivers and some of the flats south of the causeway and whatnot, you're seeing some birds. And the things that key in on those birds are, key in on the shrimp are the laughing gulls. If you see the little terns with the little orange beaks, they're little tiny birds, and they look like Batman. They got the little black around their eyes, Yeah. They'll kind of be diving on it. We call them politician birds because they'll lie to you a little bit, on what's underneath them. Yeah, I know. That's a good one. I picked that one up in Louisiana. But anywho, if you see the laughing gulls diving down on the water, that's always shrimp, and most of the time it's speckled trout has got them pushed up to the surface. So the laughing gulls is definitely the deal. And it doesn't have to be like a freaking black cloud of birds to give away a school. You know what I mean? If you're paying attention, you're reading the water, you're looking off in the distance, you see those laughing gulls kind of like swoop and dive and hover over the water and then maybe duck down and pick something up and then hover again. And that's most likely shrimp up on the surface with trout underneath them. And that has definitely given away some really, really, really good trout schools away to me here in the past, I'd say, like I said, week and a half, 2 weeks, since we've had that wicked cold front come through. Probably going right on 2 weeks ago, probably yesterday, I think.
Richard, we talked with Bobby last week, and one of the things he mentioned was that he felt like this last front was really going to change things. And David Thornton said the same thing on the onshore side. From what I can gather, they were exactly right. It looked like we had a wild temperature swing in water temperature. And it sounds like what you're saying is it's really pushing some fish into more of an artificial pattern as opposed to needing to have live bait. My question to you is, when you're going into a river off Mobile Bay or really just anywhere this time of year, let's say a guy, this is his first time out in the fall and he's just going into a river. He's going to try his favorite spot. Like you mentioned, what do you do to kind of figure it out? Like, do you have right now a go-to bait where you'd start and then I really loved your article you wrote about working the water column, where you're working, the bottom third, the middle third, and the top third. If you were going into a river right now and doing that, how would you start? What would be your progression to start to figure out what those fish wanted in that particular body of water?
That's a good question, Joe. Of course, the number one thing you got to do when you go into any, if we're talking about going into a new place, like say we're going into Dog River for the first time of the year, the first thing I'm going to be looking for is bait. You have to find the feed. You have to find where the biomass of fish are. And in my opinion, the biomass moves a lot in these rivers this time of year. Sometimes they're going to be down near the mouth. Sometimes they're going to kind of be in the middle section. Sometimes they're going to kind of be in the upper section. And so you need to be, as soon as you get out on the water, you're going to wherever you think you're going. People ask me that question all the time. Hey, Cap, where are we going? My standard answer is, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there, because I really don't know where I'm going until I get there. And it's a matter of reading the water. So I'm looking for mullet jumping, looking for pogies flipping, maybe looking for a little bit of bird activity, some pelicans diving, or even the politician birds maybe ducking and diving, or a seagull here or there. Something to show me a sign of life, and then something to show me a sign of life as to where to start. And then, of course, your electronics as well, and you can tell a lot by your electronics when you're running down the river at 30 or 40 miles an hour. Am I seeing blips in my sonar of bait, where it'll kind of look a little bit snowy almost in your in your sonar radar, listen to me, sonar, to kind of maybe just show you whether there's some schools of fish around. So going into a brand new place, you need to be reading the signs of life, and like I said, life to me is fish jumping or flipping, birds working, paying attention to your sonar. Those three things will kind of at least give you a place to start. You know what I mean? And then going from there, reading water, seeing if you see some slicks, see some blow-ups. I always get a warm and fuzzy feeling whenever I'm seeing a bunch of mullet jump in a certain area, down a certain bank, things of that nature.
Yeah, and when you say blow-ups, like I'm just reminded of very often in this fall river pattern, if you're fishing some of these points and different drop-offs in the river, you'll be sitting there and you may not be catching fish yet, but you'll just hear that pop every once in a while. It sounds like somebody popped a popping cork, and it's that fish coming up to the top of the water and eating a shrimp that's passing by, or a small pogie or something like that. One of the things I've noticed in these rivers, though, man, it does seem like your cast can be off 20 yards and you're not catching a thing, and all of a sudden you hit that right drop off and man, you're on. And then it's like a race to see who can get their get their bait back in that spot.
Right in that alley, in the strike zone.
Yeah, you got to kind of figure it out. Are you seeing those fish stacked up like that right now, where you really got to hit it just right and hit that drop off just right, or hit that spot just right? Or are they kind of still spread out?
Man, they just kind of seem like they're everywhere to me, to be honest. But, like we're having days where we're catching over 100 fish a day on artificial right now. You know what I mean? And of course, there's a zillion undersized fish, speckled trout and redfish mixed into the whole 9 yards. To me, it's wide open right now. You know what I mean? You're not having to do what you talk about as far as honing in on a certain little ledge or drop off or anything like that. There, if you find a biomass of fish, you're finding them up in shallow water. If you say you're fishing a sandbar or something like that where there's a nice little drop off, they're up on top of the bar, they're on the bar, they're in the deep side of the bar, they're like all over the place, Joe, you were asking about how do you figure out how to go to a new place or to a system that you hadn't fished before. And one thing I wanted to add about that was trying to figure out what the fish are on, you know what I mean? Whether they're on mullet or pogies or shrimp or what they're eating, something of that nature. And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, we're going fishing with a buddy. You know what I mean? I do love fishing by myself, but most of the time I do like to bring a buddy like you or Butch Cassidy over there.
I'm your buddy, Richard?
Hey, don't tell anybody, man. Don't tell anybody.
Man. That's so sad.
But most of the time, I like to mix it up a little bit when we start getting into some of these new areas. We hadn't fished a system yet for the first time. That was me in Foul River last Sunday.
Yeah, you just need to stay out of Foul Rivers. That's pretty much what needs to happen there.
Ooh, man, hey, you're right about that, man. You're right about that.
Like I've been saying, snake, definitely a snake outbreak.
But I went in East Foul the other day, and I had no idea what to expect because it was kind of my first time to go in there. And so I had 3 people on the boat. I had 2 people throwing popping corks, and me and another person were throwing a grub and a slick lure. So I had basically 3 lures hanging out there to kind of see what they were hitting on. And it was kind of one of those things, they were eating everything, you know what I mean? So obviously I think the moral of the story that day was you would get a lot more bites on a popping cork with a voodoo or a grub, bouncing grub on the bottom, but you get a little better size fishing a slick lure or some type of suspending bait that was a finfish that was trying to imitate a finfish. So, and of course we saw a few birds working, seagulls working there here and there. So I think there's definitely still some shrimp in there, and definitely the fish were chewing the rod tips off of those popping corks. So I think there's like a little bit of everything going on in there. But the moral of that story is, there again, like I was talking about earlier, pay attention to the signs, what you're seeing there. If you're looking down at the water and reading the water, you'll see when there's shrimp around, there's fish feeding on shrimp. You'll see the shrimp kind of jumping across the surface. There's definitely going to be some seagulls on them. And then a lot of times, I'll see them swimming by the boat and whatnot. And that kind of tells you what to throw, kind of tells you what they're on. I think I heard Capt Bobby talking about this exact same thing in maybe a week or 2 ago on the podcast. He was talking about that. So it's one of those things you got to pay attention to the signs.
Yep. You guys got any tournaments coming up? What's going on this fall, winter?
Ooh, man, you got me excited asking me that question, Butch.
I think your favorite's coming up, isn't it?
Oh, man, I tell you what, I feel like I live my life for the Battle of the Grubs, what we call the bog. It just, nothing in the world excites me tournament-wise other than Battle of the Grubs. And I've fished a lot of tournaments all up and down the Gulf Coast, over in Louisiana and Florida and here in Alabama, doing redfish tournaments and all kinds of stuff for a bunch of big money and fame and fortune and the whole 9 yards. And you know what? Everybody, they could have all of that, and I would just be perfectly happy. I could die and go to heaven a happy man, having known all my fishing of the Battle of the Grubs. That's just absolutely my favorite thing in the world to do. So we got our first tournament. I believe it's on December the 7th. It's going to be the first Saturday in December. We're going to meet. I might be speaking out of turn, but I'm pretty sure if it's business as usual, which I assume it is. We're going to meet at the Shell gas station there at Rangeline in Hamilton. We'll pay our money and then go fishing. And then we have the weigh-in at the Chocolata boat ramp up there on the causeway at 4 o'clock. So I think check-ins from 5 to 5:30, and then we weigh in from 4 to 4:30.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Battle of the Grubs is obviously an all-artificial tournament, correct?
That's right. Yep, it's all artificial, no live bait. This year the format's changing. Generally, in the past, I guess if you want to dig down in the history books, it used to be 10 speckled trout per team that you weighed in. Mm-hmm. And so you used to have these monster weights back in the day. And then since I've been fishing it, it's been 5 fish. And this year with the new regulation that state has come down with, we're going your 2 biggest speckled trout that are over 22 inches. So you're going to have 2 oversized speckled trout and 1 in the slot. So it's going to be a 3-fish aggregate. So you're going to have 2 oversized and then 1 in the slot. It's got to be less than 22 inches. So it'll be real interesting. It's definitely going to, we're dealing with the change of the regulation, which I think is great. I was a big advocate of that regulation coming down. And I'm super excited to see the tournament formats come in with their new formats and whatnot to adapt. That's right. And hopefully everybody, I've kind of always been a big push for these tournaments to encourage the anglers to bring their fish in alive. That being said, it's not that easy to keep any speckled trout alive, to be honest with you. So there's a lot of things you can do. We might go into in depth in that another day because I could talk about that for hours. But, there's a lot of things you can do to keep those fish alive and bring them in. And, of course, I've got a tagging kit. I'm going to tag all the fish that I catch and release and whatnot. And kind of see what your tournament fish do. It might be kind of cool to win a tournament with some fish, bring them in alive, tag them, and then see where they go from there. You might release them on the causeway there, and they might end up in Mississippi or Pensacola or who knows where they'll go, back at Dolphin Island someday.
Well, Richard, I know it's your favorite time of year with regards to those tournaments and this type of fishing, and you brought up the tagging. We're going to get the inshore tip from you this week, and it's brought to us by CCA Alabama. Another great way to support conservation projects like the Claude Petit Flounder Hatchery and the University of South Alabama Cobia Tagging Project, which both of those you've participated in, Richard, is through the purchase of a distinctive CCA Alabama saltwater fishing license plate. You guys can head over to Alabama's Department of Revenue. They have a distinctive license plate page at revenue.alabama.gov and pick one up there. Richard, what are you thinking for an inshore tip this week?
Man, inshore tip this week, fish on the bottom. What do you think? That's a good one, right?
Yeah. All right. See you guys later. Right, been a good show.
Man, one thing, speaking of fishing on the bottom, one thing I kind of wanted to hit on that I saw after this last, real little wicked cold front we had with that water, we saw the water dip down into the low 50s in a couple of different systems. And when that water gets that way, you can definitely tell that it affects the fish because you'll be fishing the same way that you're normally fishing these artificial lures, or this mainly pertains to more artificial than it does live bait. I don't fish a ton of live bait this time of year, but it mostly pertains to artificial. And you'll go on some of these wicked cold days right after the cold front, which I get really excited to fish on because some days it really turns the fish on. And some things you'll notice in the morning is that you'll get a bite. It'll be a real faint bite. It's almost like the fish are just barely able to inhale the lure or whatever. And you'll hook them and it'll almost just feel like dead weight. You know what I mean? You'll know you have a fish on the line and you'll be reeling and you'll feel just a little bit of wiggle from the trout, kind of shaking his head or whatever. But they're not going to move real big, side to side, take you out from straight off of the bow out to 10 or 9 o'clock of the boat or the other way, take you out to 3 or 4 o'clock. They're just going to kind of come straight to the boat and wiggle their head the whole way. And you can tell in those days that those fish are just lethargic. The cold weather has the cold water temperature has has come all the way through the water column, and those fish are just hanging on. I feel like they're just hanging on for dear life. I don't know if they are or not, but it's really hard to get them to bite some of those days. And the things I've done to combat that is to use something that's associated near the bottom. So I'm not throwing like top waters or slick lures or popping corks or anything like that. Most of the time I'm using some type of grub, whether it's a little slick or a paddle tail grub or something. Most of the time, little slick or paddle tail grub. And I'm just kind of swimming that thing real slow on the bottom. You know, I'm usually not putting a ton of action on the rod tip with the lure. I'm just kind of just slowly trying to swim that thing along. And that really seems to work a lot better because the fish don't have to work near as hard to inhale the bait, eat it, because their metabolisms, they're cold-blooded fish. So their metabolisms fluctuate with the water temperature, you know, and when you have these real sharp drops, when it goes from, 64, 65 degrees down to like 50 degrees, 52 degrees, it's really hard for them to deal with that. They get, like I said, lethargic to where it's really hard for them to feed. They have to feed. They need to feed. They feel the need to feed, but they can't as aggressively feed as they need to. So you got to slow everything down you're doing and really work the bottom half of the water column for sure.
Richard, we talked with Chris Veche a couple of weeks ago, and he had a really good, I felt like a really helpful way to quantify slowing it down. And you should definitely go back and listen to that show. Butch, do you remember what episode it was? I think it was maybe 85. But he was able to quantify how to slow it down. Do you have anything you use, a cadence or a method that tells you, okay, this is what I'm doing now, but if I want to slow it down, here's how I quantify that, and I'm actually able to slow it down?
So, like, when I'm working a grub, I use a 3/8-ounce jig head, and I've got whatever piece of plastic tied onto it, and I'm fishing the bottom. If I'm working a grub, I'm making contact with the bottom. So I could be a blind man, okay, and I could fish that grub without even looking at my line or anything. It's all feel, right? So the thing I always think about is making contact with the bottom. So every time that, because I can see my line stay straight whenever the bait is up off the bottom, and then when it hits the bottom, you see a big belly form in your line. You can tell, and you can almost feel it with rod tip using braided line. So the things I'll do is, instead of doing these real big sharp jigs every time, is I'll slow that down and I'll be a little bit more subtle, and I almost want to try to swim the bait a little bit versus make it look like a these big twitches that I like to do most of the time. So, like, I always if you look at shrimp in the water and whatnot, like when they're fleeing bait or when they're in the live well and whatnot, they're snapping along and twitching, they move really fast. And that's what I've tried to make my grub look like most of the time. And when this type of deal happens, and we're talking about these fish really slowing down, I try to almost swim the bait a little bit. I'm not doing these big hard twitches, trying to get a ton of bottom relief. I feel like most of the time when I'm grub fishing, I'm getting like 2 to 3 feet of bottom relief every time. I'm picking that bait up off the bottom 2 to 3 feet. And when when I slow it down, I'm trying to stay 1 to 2 feet off the bottom, so I'm starting to just slowly swim that thing a little bit. You just have to really slow your roll a lot to have success. Man, it's amazing what happens when you recognize that the fish are lethargic and you slow it down enough for them. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing they can do about it.
You may have just stumbled on it.
And there's nothing you can do about it as far as working your lure.
Richard, you may have just stumbled on a new tournament format.
What's that?
It's the blindfolded tournament. Everybody's got
the blindfolded tournament, huh? We call it the Ray Charles Invitational.
You just offended someone. That is not nice. Well,
wouldn't be the first time.
All right. Well, Richard, man, that's a great report, dude. You covered a lot of ground this week. You've been covering a lot of ground. As always, we certainly appreciate having you on. If folks want to get out there and learn the wintertime, the late fall, wintertime speckled trout, redfish fishery around Mobile Bay, they need to book a trip with you, how do they do it?
Man, probably the easiest way is going to be to hit me up on Facebook. Find Cold-Blooded Fishing on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Got a website at coldbloodedfishing.com, or give me a call at 251-459-5077. And hey, if you guys book a trip with me, don't act like my guys today and show up in shorts, because I'll make you pay for it, man. We made a little run from Dog River up to Mobile River today, and saw my man was wearing shorts. So I'm gonna make this guy pay for it, man. It was slick calm. We freaking got after it, man. It was fun. The guy was I was like, man, I don't know what I was thinking, but it was fun. You had a good time.
Dress in layers, folks. Layers, please.
That's it. Dress in layers. That's it. Layer on up, man. By the time I was jealous of his shorts by the end of the day, I'll tell you that, because it got up to 75 degrees. So I was super jealous of those shorts. I was wanting some shorts, but I just had to deal with my jeans.
All right,
boys.
Yes, sir.
Thank
we'll
y'all
talk
for
to you
having
again
me,
soon.
I can't wait for the next time.
Man, I hate that we didn't get an offshore report recorded before those guys got out of town, but sounds like that's an awesome thing that's happening offshore right now. But, man, we got some really good reports from Scott and Richard, man. Sounds like things are just as good inshore, and I'm happy to hear that the fall to winter transition has happened, and, man, it's firing off.
Absolutely. It's my favorite time of year for inshore fishing. I love those rivers, man. There's nothing better than a crisp day, catching some speckled trout, keeping it simple. It's not a lot of setup. It's not a lot of takedown. Usually you can do it right around the holidays. It's good. It's great. I love it.
Good. All right, man. This week's What Did You Learn is brought to us by Fishbites. Are you tired of scrambling for bait whenever you decide to go fishing? Have an artificial bait that's better than live bait, ready to go at a moment's notice with Fishbites. It's easy to pack and travel with, and it's also shelf stable, and not to mention tough. With Fishbites, the bait stays on the hook and the fish stay on the bait. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits and tackle at fishbites.com.
You know, Butch, we think about fish bites and we think about the strips that we use in the surf, and we think about a Fight Club, which is their inshore series, and a lot of those guys use them as, their jig baits and that type of thing. But we mentioned on there the freshwater baits, and I don't think a lot of people realize they've got a really cool bait out for our guys that do some freshwater fishing. If you ever used to fish the Uncle Josh pork rind, they have a bait that just functions the exact same way, and you can also use that bait in saltwater as a jig trailer. So if you're doing cobia, if you're doing any kind of bottom jig and anything like that, it's a really awesome same technology, same design, but it's got that curly tail jig trailer action, and it's called Bob's Your Uncle, and it is really going to change the game with bass fishing. We're working with that a lot over on the freshwater side. Really cool stuff coming out of Fishbites. If y'all haven't checked out their website, go check out fishbites.com and just take a look around. They're doing all kind of stuff.
Pompano rigs. They sent us some pompano rigs and some jig heads, and those Fight Club shrimp are awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how a lot of the inshore guys have just started to put a little piece of the strips on pretty much everything they fish.
On their top, like their treble hooks and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the way around. Can't go wrong with that stuff. So, Butch, what did you learn today, my friend?
Man, I learned a couple of things today. I don't really want to take yours if you have one, but I thought it was really cool that Richard just kind of reiterated what Chris Veche said a couple of weeks ago that was about to happen. Slow it down. How slow is too slow? Slow it down a little more than that, How about you? What'd you learn?
What I would really took to kind of hit on what you just said is when Richard was talking about that, the thing that really helped me was to visualize what I've seen shrimp do in a live well. If I'm at the bait shop or I'm looking around in my own live well, you can kind of see those shrimp. They're just kind of chilling. They're just kind of crawling along the ground, crawling along the bottom, just kind of moving super slow. I mean, inches per second, or an inch per second, super slow crawl. And then, like he said, they'll kind of twitch and jump if they're fleeing, but trying to imitate that movement with a grub, with a jig and a grub, that was an eye opener for me. Cause when you think about how slow a shrimp moves along the bottom, that's really what you're trying to imitate. Mm-hmm. And I just never have thought about it that way, because to me, a jig and a grub doesn't look like a shrimp, but that's what you're trying to do with it. that was a big thing for me. The other thing for me that I learned was, who the heck knew you could catch a limit of freaking sheep's head in the middle of fall?
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, Scott just said, well, those guys are catching them over in Pensacola. Why can't I catch them? Why can't I catch them here? And he just did it, and he made the best of it, and it worked.
It's cool to see these guys. That's how you know they're pros.
That's right.
Because me, I'm like, I'm just going to do what I've done, pretty much just fall in the same rut, and I'm not going to venture out. And they're just like, yeah, well, I'll go catch some sheep's head today. Let's go give it a try. Not scared to get out there and see what happens, and they're crushing them right now. So that's really cool. That's not a fishery I even think about in the fall. I really appreciated Scott sharing that with us, because he could have just kept that to himself.
Yep, I agree, man. And that was a great hay cap question. That fell in perfectly with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always one of the tough things. We dealt with that a lot last spring, fishing with Patrick with those sheep's head. Is like, that hookup can be tough. And it really is important to match the hardware to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark, that was from Mark Boger. He submitted that hay cap question on a Facebook post that I made earlier. And like we said earlier, we got some pure flats, some slick lure goodies Joey Landreneau is going to send to him. That's exciting. That's a fun hay cap sponsor. Yeah,
y'all get your hay cap question in. Captain Joey's going to be sending us some more slick lures, and we'll send them your way. If we choose your hay cap question, you can do that obviously at the Facebook page, or you just can email us at alabama@bestfishingreport.com. It's a great way to get in touch with us, and we certainly appreciate it. We certainly appreciate the ratings and the reviews on iTunes. That really helps out a lot, guys. So if y'all appreciate this podcast, we can't say enough about it. We say it every week, but please take a minute, go over to iTunes and drop us a review, even if it's a bad one. We'd love to get better. If you don't like it, we just want to hear from you. We want to make this the best show we can make for you guys, and it really truly does help us.
I think we have like 144 reviews on iTunes. That's pretty weak based on our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, don't call me. Butch is kind of calling y'all out.
A little bit, man. I mean, if you like it, go leave us a review.
Yeah, I mean, based on how many downloads this is getting, we could do better. So we would certainly appreciate it. It would help the show tremendously. So if you've gained any value from it, just take a minute, head over there. It just takes a second, and we really appreciate it. That's going to wrap it up this week, guys. Again, if you'd like us to send you the report each week and you're not currently subscribed, head over to greatdaysoutdoors.com/ASFR. We'll put you on our email list. We'll send you the podcast each week, along with additional articles that guys like Capt. Richard Rutland, Captain Bobby Apriscato, and Patrick Garmison. And, we get the influence from all these guys, and we write in-depth articles. We'll send you those as well. Until next week, y'all get out there, have some fun, and be safe. We'll talk to you again next week.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Foster Contracting, Fortified Roofing Pros. Did you know you could save up to 40% on your homeowner's insurance with a fortified roof? Learn more at fortifiedroofingpros.com or call them at 251-973-9999.
And also, KillerDock. Are you suffering from dock dysfunction? Check out a full line of dock enhancement at KillerDock.com. That's KillerDock.com. This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report was brought to you by me, Joe Baya, and National Land Realty. If I can help you in any way with the purchase or sale of land in Alabama or Florida, whether it's timberland, farmland, recreational land like hunting land, or even agricultural land or ranch land like horse farm, drop me a message at jbaya@nationalland.com. That's JBAYA@nationalland.com.
And also, Whistlin Waters Kayak and Charters. You can check us out at whistlinwaters.com or shoot us a phone call at 251-408-2604.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report has been brought to you by Hilton's Real-Time Navigator, bringing you the highest quality online satellite fishing chart since 2004. Your source for sea tips, altimetry, currents, and watercolor at hiltonsoffshore.com.
This is Captain Richard Rutland, and this report is brought to you by Cold Blooded Fishing. You can find us at www.coldbloodedfishing.com.